Sunday dinner was supposed to be a quiet family tradition. Instead, it turned into the night my own biological mother looked me straight in the eye and handed my husband over to his mistress. The dining room smelled of expensive roast and fake smiles. I watched as my mother, Valerie, patted the velvet seat next to my husband, Julian, gesturing for her 25-year-old guest, Serena, to sit down. Then, my mother shoved an empty crystal glass into my hand. "Fetch Serena some more wine," she ordered. When I froze, she delivered the line that ended our relationship forever. "Men need a soft, nurturing woman," she announced to the entire table. "Serena is the ideal wife I always hoped Julian would find. Not someone as rigid and dry as you." Julian just smirked and took a slow sip of his drink. I stared at the heavy bottle in my hand. I poured the dark red wine to the brim, set the bottle down with a soft click, and walked out of that house without looking back. Before I tell you how I completely dismantled her high society empire and left him homeless, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is right now. Driving away from that estate, I realized how perfectly I had played the role they assigned me. I am 32 years old, a high school math teacher who spends 60 hours a week analyzing data and managing teenagers. Yet, I completely missed the variables in my own marriage. For the past 2 years, I drained every extra dollar from my paycheck to build a $35,000 joint savings account. That money was our lifeline. It was specifically earmarked for the in vitro fertilization treatments Julian and I desperately needed to start our family. I graded papers until midnight to fund our future, while Julian complained about being too tired from his entry-level desk job to cook a single meal. But to my mother, Valerie, my prolonged fertility struggles were not a heartbreak. They were a social embarrassment. Valerie runs a highly visible nonprofit charity, and her entire existence revolves around her legacy. To her, a daughter who could not easily produce an heir was a stain on her polished family image. She viewed me as a defective asset. That is exactly why she brought Serena into our lives. Serena was 25, the daughter of Valerie's wealthiest donor, and perfectly willing to play the obedient, fashionable puppet. Valerie actively orchestrated the affair. She pushed them together, framing Serena as the ideal traditional woman, because my mother desperately wanted a pedigreed grandchild to show off to her elite circle. Julian, a cowardly parasite who loved living above his means, happily took the bait. I spent years agonizing over what was wrong with my body, terrified that I was failing my husband and disappointing my family. I tortured myself with guilt every single month. Today, standing on the other side of their ruin, I realized my body was never the problem. I was just bleeding myself dry to fund the lifestyle of parasites who had already planned my replacement. The grief burned out, leaving nothing but cold, hard math. I stopped shedding tears, wiped my face, and went straight to work. I walked into Julian's home office and pulled open his bottom desk drawer. Hidden beneath a stack of old files were the printed bank statements he thought were secure. One glance at the bottom line confirmed my absolute nightmare. Our joint savings account, the $35,000 I had literally traded my youth and sleep to build, was sitting at exactly zero. He had drained every single penny. Next, I pulled out my phone and opened the cloud archive for our front porch security camera. Julian thought he was a genius by deleting the recent clips from the main application on his phone. However, he forgot I am the one who manages our digital storage. Right there on the glowing screen was crystal clear video footage from a random Tuesday afternoon. I sat in complete silence and watched Julian passionately kissing Serena on my own front porch, right while I was miles away, stuck at a parent-teacher conference, staring at that stolen kiss. A sharp memory hit me like a physical blow. I remembered being 10 years old on Christmas morning. I watched Valerie carefully take the most beautiful, expensive wrapped gifts from under our family tree and hide them in the trunk of her car. She gave them to her wealthy friends' daughters instead of me. When I asked why, she simply told me I was too clumsy to appreciate nice things. They broke my spirit back then. She always thought I was just a silent, obedient punching bag who would accept whatever scraps she threw my way. But today, I am the one holding the hammer. She did not know her years of freezing coldness had finally forged a heart ruthless enough to hit the destroy button on her entire life. A few nights later, Julian stumbled through the front door at 2 a.m, reeking of expensive scotch and sweet perfume. He mumbled a pathetic excuse about an extended business dinner, kicked off his shoes, and carelessly tossed his tailored blazer onto the living room sofa before passing out in the guest bedroom. I watched him sleep for a moment, listening to his heavy breathing. Instead of waking him up to scream, I walked over to the sofa, picked up the jacket, and began emptying the pockets for the dry cleaner. I played the exact role of the dutiful, oblivious wife he expected me to be. As my fingers traced the silk lining, they brushed against an unusually thick seam near the chest. I felt the tiny metal teeth of a hidden zipper. Pulling it open, I extracted a folded piece of thick, textured paper. It was a physical, itemized receipt from Cartier. The total printed at the bottom was exactly $35,000. the exact amount missing from our joint savings account. He had purchased his mistress a diamond bracelet with the money meant to create our child. My chest tightened, and I almost tore the paper to shreds. Then my eyes caught a string of numbers printed near the top of the receipt. I am a math teacher. I track and memorize number patterns for a living. I recognized that specific 9-digit sequence immediately. It was the federal tax identification number for Valerie's nonprofit charity. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of their scheme clicked into place. Julian had handed my mother the stolen cash. Valerie then used her charity corporate account to purchase the jewelry for Serena, illegally bypassing the steep luxury taxes. They were so blinded by their own elitist greed that they committed federal corporate tax fraud, leaving a perfect, digitally stamped paper trail right in my hands. They believed I was too timid to ever check the accounts, let alone understand corporate tax codes. They forgot that a broken woman begs for closure, while a smart woman calls a lawyer. The very next morning, I sat in the polished office of Mr. Sterling, a ruthless forensic divorce attorney. I handed him the receipt, the bank logs, and the video footage. Within 48 hours, Mr. Sterling quietly secured a legal freeze on all of Julian's personal retirement accounts. Furthermore, because the house we lived in was legally protected under my late grandfather's irrevocable trust, my lawyer drafted a non-negotiable 30-day legal eviction notice. For the next 2 months, I smiled at Julian over morning coffee, knowing the ground beneath his feet had already been completely demolished. 2 months later, the trap was finally set. I walked into the grand ballroom of my mother's 60th birthday and charity gala. Valerie and Julian were holding court at the center table, basking in their own hubris. Serena was right by Julian's side, practically glowing as she showed off the $35,000 Cartier diamond bracelet to a group of elite donors. They looked so incredibly safe. They thought I was sitting at home, crying in the dark. I walked with purpose, bypassing the greeting line, and headed straight for the audio-visual technician booth at the back of the room. I handed the young technician a small flash drive wrapped tightly in a crisp, $500 bill. Giving him a stressed, authoritative smile, I leaned in. My mother, Valerie, added a last-minute tribute video, I told him firmly. If you ask the event planner and ruin the surprise, Valerie will have your job. Play it exactly when she takes the microphone for her toast. He pocketed the money and nodded. I slipped into the shadows at the back of the room and waited. 15 minutes later, Valerie tapped her champagne glass and took the stage. She smiled bravely at her wealthy donors, dabbing a fake tear from her eye. Family is our greatest treasure, she announced into the microphone. Sadly, my daughter Clara has struggled with severe mental instability lately. It has been a dark time, but Julian has been so incredibly strong, and we are just thrilled to welcome Serena into our inner circle to bring light back into his life. The crowd murmured in sympathetic agreement. Then, the massive projector screen behind Valerie flashed to life. It was not a family tribute. It was the crisp, high-definition security footage of Julian passionately kissing Serena on my front porch. The ballroom gasped in unison. Before anyone could process the scandal, the screen switched again. It displayed a massive, zoomed-in image of the Cartier receipt, with the charity tax identification number highlighted in bright, glowing red. I stepped out of the shadows and grabbed a spare microphone from a nearby stand. You all think I am naive, I said, my voice echoing off the walls. But I am a high school math teacher. I catch liars and track missing numbers every single day. I turned to my husband. Julian, your bags are already at a cheap motel, and my lawyer has legally frozen your retirement accounts to repay my stolen money. Then, I turned to my mother. And mother? That Cartier bracelet Serena is wearing was bought using this charity fund to dodge luxury taxes. You did not just break my heart. You committed federal corporate fraud. Good luck with the Internal Revenue Service audit on Monday morning. I only looked at their faces. Valerie's perfect, arrogant face turned a sickening shade of ash gray. The microphone trembled in her hand. Julian stumbled backward, his eyes wide with absolute, paralyzing terror. All around them, the wealthy donors recoiled, whispering in horror and disgust, physically backing away from the stage as if my mother had suddenly caught a contagious disease. Their illusion of power was completely shattered. As the reality of my words settled over the paralyzed room, a tall figure stepped forward from the shadows near the exit doors. It was Mr. Sterling, my attorney. He had been standing there the entire time, quietly observing the destruction. He walked calmly up to the edge of the stage and handed Julian a thick envelope containing the legal eviction notice and the asset freeze summons, right in front of the horrified crowd. Mr. Sterling tipped his hat slightly in my direction. You have been served, he said smoothly to my husband. My office will see you on Monday morning. Then, he turned and walked out the door. Valerie finally found her voice. She stumbled forward, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she reached toward me. Clara, please, she stammered, her perfect facade crumbling into desperate panic. Stop this. We can fix this. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. My eyes were completely dead of any affection, anger, or sorrow. You erased me from the family at Sunday dinner, I told her, my voice echoing one last time through the silent ballroom. I am just making it official. I let go of the heavy microphone. It hit the wooden stage floor with a loud, final thud. I turned around and walked out of the ballroom, leaving them suffocating in the wreckage of their own making. I never heard their voices again. The very next morning, the charity board held an emergency meeting and ousted Valerie completely to avoid a federal prison sentence, stripping away the social standing she valued more than her own daughter. Julian found himself homeless, his accounts entirely frozen, and was immediately dumped by Serena the second his stolen money dried up. As for me, I spent the following weekend painting the living room of my grandfather's house a warm, bright yellow. For the first time in 32 years, I could finally breathe clean air. The justice that followed that night was not just social. It was exact. And it was devastating. Valerie's charity was subjected to an aggressive, unyielding audit by the Internal Revenue Service. Because the fraud involved the direct misappropriation of nonprofit funds to evade luxury taxes, she was formally indicted on felony charges. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in a federal minimum security prison, and the court ordered full restitution of the $35,000, plus an additional $40,000 in federal fines. But her true punishment was the absolute loss of her social empire. Her elite donors completely blacklisted her. She became a total pariah in the very circles she once ruled. Julian did not fare any better. During the final divorce settlement, the judge ruled his actions constituted a gross dissipation of marital assets. My attorney systematically liquidated his remaining retirement accounts to pay me back every single penny he stole. Broke, publicly humiliated, and stripped of his borrowed luxury, Serena left him within a week. He now rents a tiny studio apartment on the edge of town and works a low-level retail job just to pay his mounting legal debts. About 6 months after the gala, I received a thick envelope in the mail. The return address belonged to the federal correctional facility where my mother is currently serving her sentence. I recognized her elegant, looping handwriting immediately. I could imagine the exact words inside, desperately trying to twist the narrative, telling me she did it all for the family, that she was still my mother, and that I owed her my forgiveness. I stood in my kitchen, holding that letter, and I felt absolutely nothing. I did not open it. I did not tear it up in anger. I simply dropped it into the kitchen trash can along with the morning coffee grounds, tied up the plastic bag, and took it out to the curb. It was just garbage. My life now is remarkably quiet and incredibly beautiful. The house my grandfather left me is filled with light, laughter, and people who actually respect me. I spend my Sunday dinners hosting my closest friends, the teachers I work with, and the neighbors who checked on me when everything fell apart. They are my chosen family. We do not use expensive wine to impress each other, and we do not trade cruel insults disguised as advice. We just share good food and genuine love. The heavy, suffocating anxiety I used to feel every single day is completely gone. People always ask me if I regret doing it so publicly. They ask if I feel guilty for destroying my own mother's reputation and ruining my husband's life. The truth is, I only regret that it took me 32 years to realize they were never my family to begin with. When you grow up in a toxic dynamic, you are taught that blood is a mandatory debt. But here's the reality. They did not hate me. They hated that they could not control me. If you take anything away from my story, let it be these 3 rules. Rule number 1. The illusion of loyalty. Blood is merely genetics, not family. Toxic relatives will demand your unconditional loyalty while only giving you conditional love. You are absolutely allowed to stop paying the toll. Rule number 2. Silence is a weapon. When you are betrayed, your very first instinct is to scream, to cry, and to demand closure. Do not do it. Closure from an abuser is a complete myth. Gather your receipts in total silence, because the loudest person in the room is usually the one losing control. Rule number 3. The price of independence. Walking away from abusers means you will inevitably become the villain in their narrative. Accept that role. Be the villain. It is the price of admission for your peace, and it is worth every single penny. We are constantly taught to forgive because it is considered the right thing to do. But sometimes, the right thing to do is to hold people strictly accountable for the pain they intentionally cause. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who shared your blood just to save your own life? Tell me in the comments below. Because out here, in the peace and quiet, I want you to know that you are not alone. I am Clara, and I am finally free.